Good day, culinarians. Today we're going to be focusing on Chapter 3 in your culinary book. Chapter 3, page 41. I'll be lecturing on tools and equipment. When you get done watching this video, you come into class. I'm going to give you a test on this chapter. With your tests, hold on to all your tests, because at the end of the semester, your final exam, your final written exam, will consist of all the questions from the tests you've been taking all semester. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull some of the questions off each one of your tests and put that together for your final exam. So your study guide for your final written exam will be all the tests you take all semester long. So remember, keep a hold of all your tests. As I'm going through the lecture on this, I'm going to pull a lot of the information right out of the book. If you have any questions, shoot me an email or jot down your questions and when you come to class. Ask me those questions in class and I'll try to answer the best I can. But take notes, listen to the video, read the chapters. It's very important that you read all these chapters in order to do well on your tests and understand some of the knowledge coming out of these chapters. So, starting out, Chapter 3, Tools and Equipment, go straight to page 42. 42, Cooking Equipment, Introduction to Food Equipment. Whenever you use a piece of equipment in the kitchen, on page 42 it has some stamps on there, the NSF stamp and the UL stamp for electricity. Make sure all equipment has those stamps on it, NSF or UL. Okay, that means it's worthy to be in a commercial kitchen. On page 43, they talk about different types of range tops. You got your open elements, flat tops, heavy duty, flat tops, induction, cooktops. On top page 43, they have the open burner gas range. That's what we have here. We have the open burner gas range right behind me. There's 4 eyes in each one of those open gas ranges that you'll be cooking on when you come into the kitchen. There's all different types of cooking with the flat or open flame. One of the things they talk about here is induction burners. We purchased some induction burners for you guys to play around with in the kitchen. When we start doing our cuisines in the spring, we might have some cooking stations set up there. If we do have cooking stations set up, according to the fire marshal, we cannot have open flames in a room where guests are at. So you got to cook on induction burners. So we got induction burners to cook with. When you get in Chef Corey's class, you'll be able to cook with some induction burners. In our class, we'll break into them a little bit just so you guys get the idea of using them. But for the most part, you'll be using a lot of induction cooking burners in Chef Corey's class. Page 44, we get into different types of ovens. Okay, 2 types of ovens. We got the conventional ovens and the convection ovens. Conventional ovens, basically the type of ovens you have at your house. You turn them on, bring them up to a certain temperature, and bake with them. Convection ovens will have a fan in there. The fan will help circulate the heat in the oven. If you have the fan on and you're using the convection oven, keep in mind it's usually about 25 degrees hotter. So if the recipe calls to bake something at 350 degrees, and you turn that fan on, now you have a convection oven. You want to set your thermometer, your thermostat at 325 degrees. Allow for about 25 degree difference. It'll be 25 degrees hotter when you use a fan. When you're baking, either one is fine. I like cooking with both of them, depends on what I'm doing. Most of the time I do use the convection cooking because I feel it gets the product done a little bit quicker with the circulating of the air, the hot air in the stove. I think it works a lot better. But there are certain things you can't cook in there. If you go to cook some cakes or some custards and you want to put them in the oven, if you have that fan turned on, that fan circulating in the oven will cause little ripples on top of your cakes or custard because that fan is blowing things around in there. You don't want that on top of a cake or a custard. So generally speaking, if you're doing a cake or a custard, turn the fan off. Page 45, we get into different types of ovens. Combination steamer ovens, pretty much called combi ovens in the industry. They're half steam, half dry heat, or a combination of both. When I worked at the casino, I went ahead and put all combi ovens in the restaurants. Made it a lot easier to use. If you have a combi oven in there, for example, Friday nights we had seafood night at our buffet. We put a speed rack in the upright combi oven, put the speed rack in there, roast off all the prime rib for that evening. So we put probably about 24 to 30 prime ribs in there, roast them all at the same time, pull those out, switch it from dry heat to steam, and then we steam off crab legs. We go through, 200 to 300 pounds of crab legs at a time. So we load them up in there and steam them all off. So we went from dry heat to steam right away. You can also do the combination. If you're doing ribs, a lot of times you want to put a little moisture in when you're cooking ribs. So you put a dry rub on there, put them in the combi oven, set it about 90% dry heat, 10% moisture. Gets a little bit of that moisture in there, a little bit of the dry in there. Makes for a very tender rack of ribs, barbecue ribs if you're doing them that way. So the combi ovens are a very good piece of equipment to use if you have them in your kitchens. Infrared, bottom page 45, infrared cooking. Infrared cooking, you have quartz tubes. It's very high-end heat on infrared cooking. A lot of steakhouses use them because it has such high heat and you get a good sear on there. You have wood-burning ovens, smokers. I'm sure you're all familiar with smokers. We have a smoker here throughout the semester. We tend to use it for different projects we're working on. Page 46, we get into broilers and salamanders. Okay, broilers and salamanders. Salamander is something that sits on top of the stove. You can see behind me, this up here, that's a salamander. That piece of equipment is a salamander. It sits on top of the stove, generally used for melting items. If you have French onion soup, put your soup in a crock, put a crouton on there, put some Swiss cheese or some Gruyere cheese on top, stick it on there, and it melts it off really nicely. When you guys are in class here, when we get into breakfast cooking, we're going to use that to toast our English muffins for the Eggs Benedict, and we're also going to use that to heat up the Canadian bacon for the Eggs Benedict. But salamander, generally used for melting product. Can you cook on it? You can. It's going to take a little bit longer to cook on it. A lot of times if we're under a pinch, if we're working in a restaurant, we have a salamander, we might mark off our meat, put markings on there, and then finish it in the oven. A broiler is more of direct heat. It's a lot hotter. And a broiler is what you're going to use to cook some of your steaks, your chicken, or broil off any kind of meat you want to broil off. Grills, they talk about grills on page 46. We got a grill here in the kitchen. When we get into the meat chapter, hopefully get in some buffalo meat. I'll cut into steaks and let you guys grill off some buffalo steaks. I'll show you how to do the diamond marks, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock turn on there, and we'll get some diamond marks. You guys get to try to cook on the grill. Griddles, top page 47, they talk about griddles. Griddles are very easy to use. Conditioning griddles after each cleaning is extremely important. With the griddle, you clean it after each use. The griddle, the heat is coming from the bottom and goes up to the top where you have that flat metal place to cook off of. We have a griddle in the kitchen here. when you guys come in here in the kitchen, we'll do a little scavenger hunt. I'll show you around the kitchen, and I'll show you where the griddle is, where the broiler is. Griddle, after you get finished using it, it's imperative that you clean it off because a lot of buildup is on there. We have a very eco-friendly cleaning solution we put on there. It's made out of citrus, and we put that on there and cleans the griddle very well. In the book here, it says with the griddle, when you're done using it, a lot of times you put a thin coating of oil on it. I don't do that. I actually recommend not to do that, because if you put that thin coat of oil on there, it'll help preserve it, which is good. But then when you go to crank up the griddle to use it, that thin coating of oil's on there, and it could burn and make it a little bit sticky on there. So whenever we finish cleaning it, we're going to keep it dry. So if something spills on there, we just wipe it up. But we're going to keep it dry, but in the book it says put a little thin coat of oil on there. Bottom page 47, you got your deep fryers. Deep fryers, we don't have one in our kitchen. If we need deep fry something, we'll borrow the early college deep fryer. They usually have theirs filled up with oil. Deep fryer, you'll cook product either at 300 degrees to 350, 360 degrees, depending on what it is. If you're cooking something like hush puppies, you want to put it in there. You want to have a low heat so it doesn't burn before it gets cooked all the way on the inside. If you're cooking something like fried shrimp, fried chicken, you might increase the temperature about to 350 or so, so you get a good crisp outside. Some of the things they have on bottom page 47, do's and don'ts of the fryer. Talk about when filling the kettles, fill with fat. We use oil here. If we use the one in the early college, we'll use oil. Back in the old days, the lard came in 25 or 35 pound square blocks, and you put it in there. Right now, most of the oil for the fryers is liquid, so you pour it in there. When you pour the oil in there after you clean it, make sure the valve is closed on the bottom. If it's not closed, you're going to end up a bunch of oil all in your shoe. It's happened. It's happened a lot. It's happened to everybody. It's happened to me. It's happened to nearly every kitchen I work in. Sometimes somebody leaves that bottom spigot open, the oil comes right out. Close that spigot up, fill it with oil. When you fill your fryer with oil, it's going to have a line on there to fill to that line. When you fill the oil up, fill it right underneath that line, because when you turn the fryer on and that oil starts to expand, it's going to expand up to where that line is. So you always want to come in just a little bit short of where that line is when you're filling up with cold oil. Check the accuracy of the temperature. Most fryers, it's going to have a gauge to show you what temperature to set the fryer oil at. So if you set it at 350, that oil should be 350. What I do every once in a while is take a candy thermometer, put it in there, and check the oil. So if you have the gauge set at 350, I put a thermometer in there, it reads 350, you're good to go. If it's a little under, a little bit over, it's going to affect the way you cook product. So it's very imperative that every once in a while you go in and you check to make sure that oil temperature is very consistent to what it should be. Page 48. 48, we get into tilting skillets and steam jackets. Tilting skillet, page 48, they have a picture of it there. Tilting skillet is a great piece of equipment. It's a big old square piece of equipment. And the reason why it's called tilting skillet, because you use it just like a skillet, but it has a crank on it. Whenever you get finished working in there, finish doing what you're doing, you can crank it up, and the thing will raise up and tilt. Okay. The reason why it raise up and tilt is to get the product out there. So in the morning, if you're using that tilt skillet, you'll be in there scrambling eggs. You got a big breakfast that morning. You throw in a bunch of eggs. You scramble up your eggs. Get it all looking good. You go finish up breakfast. You clean it out. Now you got to make soup. So you throw in all your ingredients for soup. You're making a good beef vegetable soup. Throw in your beef, your vegetables. You cook it off. When you're done, you tilt that skillet up. It'll help drain it out of that skillet into a bucket or a bain-marie, whatever you're going to hold it in. So it makes it a lot easier to use because it'll tilt up on you. Steam jackets and kettles. Steam jackets and kettles, they have one here in the early college. When you guys come in the kitchen, I'll show you where that is. It basically heats from around the kettle with steam. Okay, very good product to use if you cook soup in there. You keep things warm. You can heat stuff up, but it heats with steam around the outside of the kettle, and less chances of product burning using that steam kettle. Steam cookers. Steam cookers ideal for cooking vegetables and other products. Pretty much close to the same thing as steam cookers. Up top on page 49 is a couple pictures of different steam cookers. If you're using a steamer for a cooker, a lot of times you put your product in a 200 pan or 2-inch hotel pan, throw it in there, turn the steamer on, and the steam your product up for vegetables to any kind of meats. You know, if you're making fried chicken, you might want to throw your chicken in there, steam it off for a little bit, cook it up a little bit, batter it, bread it, throw it in the fryer. It'll help cook it a little bit more evenly that way. Bottom page 49, we get into mixers. They have the small tabletop mixer, which you guys use in Baking One and Pastry and Confection. And it has a large tabletop mixer. One in the book there is looks like a floor model. The one we have in the kitchen here is a table model. It's a big 20-quart mixer. Use that if you make big batches of bread or cake batter or something like that. Page 50 talks about the different pieces of equipment that go on the mixer. You got the paddle, the whisk, and the hook. Okay, make sure you use a proper tool for the proper job. If you're doing bread, you want to grab the hook. If you're whipping something up, say you're making a large batch of whipped cream, you'll use a whip. If you're making cake batter, you might use a paddle. Okay, so make sure you use a proper piece of equipment, proper tool when you go to use the mixer. Page 50, middle page there, they talk about food cutter or a buffalo chopper. Chef Ray has one of these up at the Civic Center. So when you get into Garmin J, Chef Ray will show you the buffalo chopper. Basically, a buffalo chopper is a round bowl, and in that round bowl is a blade, a two-sided blade, and it'll go around in circles. The two-sided blade will go around in circles, and it'll chop things up. So if a chef comes up to you and gives you a whole case of parsley, it says, chop up this case of parsley. Are you going to do it by hand? No, it might take you a while to do that. So what you do is you take that parsley, clean it all off, get all the stems off, and take all that parsley, throw it in the hopper or the bowl of that buffalo chopper, turn it on, and as it spins, the bowl spins around one way, the blades will spin the other way, and it'll chop that stuff up very fine. You can chop all kinds of stuff in there, onions, carrots, celery, whatever you want to do. Whatever you put in there will chop it up really fine. You never want to stick your hand inside a buffalo chopper, because if you stick your hand in there, you're going to pull out a nub. It'll take your fingers right off in an instant. You won't even know it happened. That's how quick those things are. You never want to stick a wooden spoon in there, or spatula, or anything in there, because if you stick it in there, it'll chop it up really well. Bottom page 50, they get into attachments for mixers and food choppers. On bottom page 50 there, they show an attachment. It's a meat grinder. We got a meat grinder here. If you go to make sausages, or if you just want to grind up some meat for a particular project, it'll attach onto our large mixer over there, right at the front, right at the top, put it on there, and the mixer will become a grinder for grinding up meats or whatever you need to grind up. Page 51, we get into slicers and shredders. If you're doing any kind of industrial work, doing large amounts of stuff, if you have to slice or shred any particular product, the chef comes up to you and says, here's 50 pounds of cheese, I need to shred it up. Are you going to take those little handheld shredders and just shred it up? No. You're going to hook up that attachment, cut it into little square blocks, put it through the shredder, and you can shred up the cheese real quick. got your meat slicer. We got the meat slicer in the kitchen here. If we ever have to do any kind of slicing for any kind of project, we have the meat slicer here. Page 52, we get into blenders and emulsion blenders. Blender, blades on the bottom, circles round. We got several different types of blenders here, along with the Robocoo, top page 52. We have a Robocoo, very good piece of equipment, good for processing all kinds of food. Page 53, we get into hot holding equipment. Hot holding equipment or steam table. Here in the early college, they have a steam table over there on the line to keep all the food hot for lunch service and for breakfast service. Remember, steam table is for keeping food hot. Okay, you're going to keep the food warm or hot in the steam table. Never use the steam table to heat up product. Okay, so you got lunch going on. You got have some brown gravy on there. What do? You take your brown gravy, heat it up to 165, put it on the steam table. Never take that brown gravy, put it on the steam table, and heat it up that way. If you put it on there 8 o'clock in the morning, will it be hot by 12 o'clock for lunch service? Absolutely, it will be. But that heating process, you'll be heating it up for about 4 hours. So it's going to be in the temperature danger zone for a long period of time before it gets up to temperature. People can get sick that way. So whenever you heat something up, if you're heating up a gravy, you want to heat it up to 165 as quick as possible. Then put it on the steam table. If you put it on the steam table cold and let it heat up by itself that way, it's going to take a long period of time. It's going to be in the temperature danger zone, and people get sick. Okay, so never use the steam table to heat up products, only to keep them warm. Bottom page 53, we got cold food storage equipment. Cold food storage equipment. They talk about a walk-in cooler here in the kitchen. We have a walk-in cooler, has all of our product in it. Once you go in the walk-in cooler, you'll see all the shelves set up in there. We'll have a shelf with my name on it. We'll have a shelf with Chef Corey's name on it. And we'll have a shelf with Chef Page's name on it. When you go in there for your class, you only take the food off the shelf where the name is for your class. So for my class, if you need anything, it comes off of my shelf. My shelf has my name on it, Chef Keith. If you need anything, take it off that shelf. Don't take it off of Chef Corey's. Don't take it off of Chef Page. Because if you take product off of somebody else's shelf, when they come into class and they're expecting to grab or take something and it's not there, then they can't do their class properly. So when you go in that walk-in cooler, all the shelves are labeled. Just take the product off the shelf where the chef's name is. So for me, for my class, for you guys, only take the stuff off the shelf where it has my name. There's also a shelf there with nobody's name on it. That's a use-all shelf. So if we're working on something and I have some carrots and celery left over and we don't need it anymore, I'll put it on that shelf. That means it's up for anybody to use. So when you go in the walk-in cooler, take stuff off my shelf or take it off that shelf that has nobody's name on it. Okay? So we got the walk-in coolers, reaching freezers. Here in the kitchen, our freezer is a reach-in freezer. It's a 4-door or a 3-door freezer. Reach-in has all the product in there. Any product we have for class is in there. If we need something, we'll pull it out, let it sit in the walk-in cooler for a couple days, thaw it out, and we'll use it in class. But for us, we have a large reach-in freezer. Page 54, we get into pots, pans, and containers. Metals, the type of metal for your pots and containers is very important. Okay. Page 54, they talk about the thickness of the metal, the kind of metal that you want to use. You know, the thickness of the metal is very important. When you're cooking, you want a thick metal pot. If you use a real thin metal pot and you go to cook with, it could burn the product. So generally speaking, if we have really thin pots, they can be used for heating up water or some clear stock. Thin metal pots, generally you don't want to put anything thick or anything with a lot of garnish in the broth, because it could burn. Our pots, we have a lot of thick pots in here. Pots we have are for cooking on the gas. They're also good for cooking on induction burners because they have the real thick bottoms. Okay. Types of metal, you got aluminum. Our pots here, we have a few pots in here that have the aluminum, the real thick aluminum. It's good for cooking with. Whatever the other pots we have are stainless steel pots for cooking. Both of them are heavy duty industrial pots. Pans also made out of the cast iron. You got your cast iron pans. We got a couple cast iron pans down there when we do a lot of, if we're doing some gumbo or some blackening or something like that. But we got some really heavy duty cast iron, large cast iron pans. And we got a cast iron Dutch oven, or cast iron 4-inch deep cast iron pan. If you want to do some frying in that, you can do some frying in there. Cast iron is really great to work with. I got cast iron at my house I use all the time. If I'm in the kitchen here, if I'm doing something, I always enjoy pulling out that cast iron to cook with, because the cast iron distributes the heat a lot more evenly than other pots and other metals do. Copper, stainless steel. Like I said, stainless steel. We have stainless steel here with our pots that we use. Porcelain, enamel, lined pans. You'll see porcelain, enamel lined pans. You'll see that a lot on cooking shows. I would highly suggest don't use those to cook with. Okay, the porcelain, enamelized pans, they might be heavy duty. But when you cook with porcelain, porcelain tends to chip. So if you're cooking with porcelain, a lot of times that porcelain will chip off the pot and go into the food. So I would highly recommend not using porcelain pans to cook with. You see them, like I said, you see them a lot on these cooking shows that have Dutch oven porcelain pots that they're cooking with. They look really nice, they look really pretty, but they're not very good to cook with. So stay away from that porcelain stuff to cook with. Page 55, we get into different pots and pans and their uses. You got stock pots, sauce pots, braziers. Braziers you use quite a bit in the kitchen here. Saucepans, you'll use that a lot in the kitchen. Saute pans, sloped and straight-sided saute pans. We'll use the sloped saute pans when we get into breakfast cooking. I want to show you guys how to flip the eggs properly. We'll use the sloped saute pans for that. Cast iron skillets, double boilers. Page 56. Now I'm going over these pages. It has a lot of pictures and a lot of lists of what the equipment is. I would highly suggest that you read this chapter and make sure you know what all that equipment is, because you never know if it's going to show up on the test or not. Okay? So if it shows up on the test and you read this and you know what all these pans are, it might help you on your test. Okay? So page 56, you get in the sheet pans. We got the large sheet pans here, and we got the half sheet pans here. We'll use those to put those in the oven to cook with. You got your roasting pans. Roasting pan, we use that if we make a large batch of stock. Put a bunch of beef bones in there, we'll roast them off and make some stock out of that. Fish poachers, we got a couple fish poachers in the kitchen here. Get into Skills 2 or Global, and you want to poach some fish. I teach a food competition class and a catering class, and a lot of times we'll use the poachers in those classes. Woks, we got a couple woks here if you want to get into some Asian cooking. Hotel pans, okay? Hotel pans, also called steam pans, also called 200 pans. They're called all kinds of stuff, basically. Depends on where you go. I've traveled all over this country, worked at all kinds of places, and it seems like wherever I go, that region has a different name for these hotel pans. Basically, the hotel pan, steam pan, they come in 2-inch, 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, and up to 10-inch deep. Okay, their length, the full hotel pan is about this long. Half hotel pan is half that size. Then you get a quarter hotel pan, third hotel pan. It gets all different sizes. We have a lot of sizes of hotel pans in the kitchen here. A lot of times the hotel pans, if a chef calls out, I need a 2-inch hotel pan, you get the 2-inch long hotel pan. For me, I call them 200 pans. So if I say 200 pan, that's a full 2-inch hotel pan. If I say 400 pan, that's a 4-inch hotel pan. They also come in half pans, 2-inch half pans, and so forth. But we got pretty much all those over there in the kitchen here. You got your Ben Verrees. Ben Verrees are the cylinder containers. We got a few of them in the kitchen here. Ben Verrees can be used for holding product. So if you need a double boiler, you can put two of them together on the stove and you end up with a double boiler. If you have a steam table and you have soup for a day, a lot of times you put the soup in the Ben Verree, put it in the steam well, and it'll stay hot in there. Measuring devices, hand tools, and small equipment, bottom page 56. Got your scales, portion scales, digital scales, baker scales. We got all those in the kitchen. When you come in the kitchen, if you look in the drawers, you'll see digital scales. At the front of the kitchen, on the prep table here, you'll see some weight scales. Use those in baking. It's the old-time weight. You put a weight on one side, and on the other side you put your product to weigh it out to see what you want. You also have the handheld scales in the kitchen here, so you have all kinds of different scales you can use. Measuring cups, measuring spoons. We have all kinds of measuring cups, measuring spoons in your knife kit. You should have measuring spoons, teaspoons, tablespoons, and so forth. In the kitchen here, we also have them. Ladles, scoops, thermometers, page 57. Get into knives, carbon steel knives. We went over knives in Mise en Place. We'll go over knives in our Mise en Place chapter. Show you guys how to handle a knife properly. Most knives have high carbon steel. A lot of good ones have really good high carbon steel, covered with stainless steel. A lot of cheaper ones have low carbon and tend to rust or bend. The ones we have are good European high carbon steels. These knives will last you forever as long as you take care of them. Bottom page 58, get into knives. French knife, chinook, utility knife, paring knife, boning knife, slicing knife. Top page 59, you get your serrated knife. Serrated knife is used for cutting cakes and breads and stuff like that. You got your butcher's knife. Make sure you know the difference between the butcher's knife, which is long, thick, curved knife, and then you got your scimitar, steak knife. That's curved, but it has a sharp point on it. When we go to break down the buffalo in our meat class, I'll pull out the scimitar, and you'll see it's a very long butcher knife. If you ever work in a butcher shop, that's what they're going to be using in there. Got your cleavers, oyster knives, clam knives, your steel. Your steel, when we get into using your knives properly, I'll show you how to steel product. Steel your knife correctly so you can keep a nice edge on there. Cutting boards. On cutting boards, we use the hard plastic ones here. They're very good, slip resistant. Cutting boards, if you're going to use a cutting board, don't use a glass cutting board or a metal cutting board. Those tend to dull your knives a little bit. Okay. Bottom page 59, you get into the melon ballers, the cook's fork, straight spatula, curved spatula. Page 60, get into more pieces of equipment. Got your pastry wheel. You'll use a pastry wheel. Usually use a pastry wheel for cutting up pizzas. Skimmers, wire whips, china caps. China cap, we got china caps here in the kitchen. China cap has large holes And right underneath that is the chamois. The chamois has a really fine hull in there. We'll use those when we get into stocks and we go to drain the stocks. We'll drain it through a china cap, then we'll drain it through a chamois to make it real pure stock. Strainers. Top page 61, we get into colanders. Colanders, we got a colander up here, a couple colanders in the kitchen here. Usually you use the colanders if you clean up lettuce for salads and stuff. Food mill, you can use a food mill process if you want to make a soup, some sort of crate soup, put it through the food mill to get it nice and fine in there. Get all kinds of stuff, channel knives, mandolins, pastry bags. On these pages here, page 55 through 61, there's a lot of pictures of pieces of equipment with names on it. I would highly suggest, like I said earlier, I would highly suggest looking over that and understanding and seeing what those pieces of equipment are, because it could show up on a test. All right, that's it for kitchen equipment. Meet up in the kitchen. We'll do a little scavenger hunt and show you guys what's going on in the kitchen. But any questions, shoot me an email, write them down, bring them to class, and I'll try to answer them in class. All right? Thank you very much.